Test. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if everyone can take a seat, we'll begin in about 10 seconds. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll commence with the Planning Committee. Before we begin, though, I'll just make a quick note. Councillor Alan Hubley is representing us as Vice Chair today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Because unfortunately the Chair, as you know, you take wild horses to drag her away from this table, but unfortunately is suffering from a mild concussion, so she'll be off today and we wish her well. So I'll be serving as chair today. That being said, I'm going to I'll go. Got it. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed in items 1 to 6 in today's agenda. For the items mentioned, only those who make oral submission today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal this matter to the local planning appeal tribunal. In addition, the application may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal if council does not adopt the amendments within 150 days of receipt of the application for zoning and 210 days for the official plan amendment. A comment sheet is available at the door for anyone wishing to submit written comments for these amendments. Also, just quick note, councillors, as a reminder, if you have any motions for the items listed today, please provide a copy ahead of time so we can use them, and please provide them to our staff. So, first of all, any declarations of interest? Seeing none. Confirmation of the minutes. March 28th, 2019. Are these confirmed? Thanks, Jeff. Moving on to the agenda. The first item on the agenda, we do have a delegation. It's related to 10 Oblades and 175A Main Street, so we'll hold that item. Ron Rose, are you in the crowd today? Ron? Okay, good. Thank you. Item number 2 is the zoning bylaw amendment for 20 Mark Avenue. We have a speaker here today as well, so we'll hold that item. Item number 3 is 263 Greensway Avenue, and we do have quite a few delegations. We have 4 here today, so we'll hold that item. Item number 4, we have it's 4840 Bank Street. I do have a Daniel Flanagan on this sheet. Daniel, you're here. Are you here to speak in favor of or against? Okay, so I guess we'll hold that item. Item number 5, we have 4747 and 4755 Bank Street. We have no speakers on that one. Yeah, so we do have a amending motion, and we do have the applicant, Vincent. If this carries, do you see the need to speak, Vincent? Are you here? Okay, so seeing that. Yeah, absolutely.
How many houses do we expect to be built in this neighborhood? 250 more? Thank you.
So on that item, I'll go to Vice Chair Hubley to read the amending motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Therefore, be it resolved that items 4, 5, and 6, actually the same motion is going to apply to all 3, on the Planning Committee agenda of April 11th reports ACS 2019-PIE-PS-0033 and ACS 2019-PI-PS-0031, and finally ACS 2019-PI-PS-0032 be amended to include the following comment from Councillor Meehan. Quote, Councillor Meehan would like some effort by planning staff and the developers to review the placement of any park and natural spaces within these three applications to protect some of the established trees and scrubs. Instead of clearing the land and redeveloping a park space and planting new trees, the councillor would like to see some of the established trees to be protected and incorporated into the natural and park spaces. End of quote.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair Hubley. So on that motion, yep, go for it.
Why are these comments being added at this point? Was she not circulated on the report in the first place?
Mr. Chair, yes, the report requests for comments would have been circulated in advance of.
Okay, so she had plenty of opportunity to provide comments before today? All right, thanks.
The councillor was aware
Okay.
of the report.
So on the motion that Vice Chair Hubley has read, that would apply to all three. Is that item carried? Thank you. And on item number 5 itself, is that item carried? No, actually the speaker is on item number 4. So item number 5, we don't have any speakers listed except for the applicant, and he says there's no need to speak if this one's carried. So on item 5, is that carried? As amended, carried as amended. Thank you. Item number 6, we don't have any speakers on this one either. It's 4789 Bank Street. On this item, is this item carried? And as amended, that's correct. Item number 7, we do have a speaker on the list. So it's the applicant, so Curtis. Curtis, are you in the crowd here today? If we're good with this, do you feel a need to speak today? Okay. So on this item, we do have a amending motion, I believe, and I'll go to Vice Chair Hoop.
Okay. Whereas Minto has undertaken the design and construction of similar infrastructure, i.e. roundabouts along Brian Coburn Boulevard within the last year, and whereas there is a desire to ensure consistency of work and ensure the project meets the city timeline, therefore be it resolved that the Planning Committee recommend to Council to approve that Minto may extend the existing design and construction contract it has in place relating to the design and construction of the roundabout at Brian Coburn Boulevard and Strasbourg Street to proceed with the proposed works identified within the front-ending report, roundabout Brian Coburn Boulevard at Jerry Lalonde Drive / Jerome Jodouin Drive, ACS 2019-PI-PS-0030 at Brian Coburn Boulevard at Jerry Lalonde Drive and Jerome Jodouin Drive.
Great. So thank you for that, Vice Chair Hubley. Again, seeing no speakers on this item as amended. Is this carried? Great. Thank you. On to item number 8. We don't have any listed speakers except for Marie Chown. But that being said, if this item carries, Murray, do you feel a need to speak today? Great. Thank you. So again,
on item 8, I've got a couple just quick questions.
So you want to hold that? Okay. So we'll have a. We're going to hold that. Item number 8 is held. And we're right back at the beginning. All right. So on to item number 1. Great. So we'll just wait for the staff to take a seat. And at this point, we do only have one delegation, Ron Rose, if you want to come. Oh. Okay. So we'll get Ron Rose to come forward. And please, if you can take the seat right there. So while we're waiting for our delegation to come forward, I'll get Vice Chair Hubley. We do have a technical amendment. If I can get Vice Chair Hubley to please read that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Therefore, be it resolved that Planning Committee recommend to Council that the report recommendation be modified to the following. That the Planning Committee recommend Council approve an amendment to the zoning bylaw 2008-250 for 175A Main Street to permit a 6-story building as detailed in Document 2, details of the recommended zoning for Building 2A, and also therefore be it resolved that the Planning Committee recommend to Council that Document 1, the location map, be revised to the following. And therefore be it resolved that the Planning Committee recommend to Council that Document 2, details of recommended zoning for Building 2A, be replaced with the following. The proposed change to the City of Ottawa zoning bylaw 2008-250 for 175A Main Street. 1, rezone the lands shown in Document 1 as follows. A, rezone Area A from TM 2301 and H bracket 20 to TM bracket 1 H bracket 20. And number 2, add a new exception, TM bracket 1 H bracket 20 to section 239, urban exceptions, with the provision similar in effect to the following. A, in column 2, add the text TM bracket 1 H20, bracket 20, and B, in column 5, add the text minimum front yard setback 2 meters, maximum front yard setback 3 meters. Subsection 197 bracket 4 applies with respect to the above minimum and maximum front yard setbacks. However, 197 bracket 4 bracket D does not apply. A parking garage is only permitted below grade. Ornamental elements such as sills, belt courses, cornices, parapets, and pilasters, I hope I'm saying that right, and canopies and awnings may project up to 0.2 meters of the property line. Section 197 bracket 3 bracket G bracket 2 does not apply. A rooftop washroom area to maximize height of 4.2 meters is considered a permitted projection above the height limit. 2, has a maximum floor area of 20 square meters. And therefore, be it resolved that the Planning Committee recommend to Council that Document 3, details of the recommended zoning for Building 2B, be removed from the report, and therefore be it resolved that there be no further notice pursuant to subsection 34, bracket 17 of the Planning Act. That's it. Wow. And that was just the therefore be it resolved.
Isn't Vice Chair fun? Isn't that a wonderful role? All right. So on that, thank you very much for that. And we have Mr. Rose here. Mr. Rose, you have 5 minutes to speak. The floor is yours.
Ready to go? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to this motion. The Old Ottawa East Community Association supports the proposal to split consideration of the 2 buildings in question. We welcome the decision to seek an official plan amendment for this particular zoning designation further down the line. We have some concerns with the proposed changes for Building 2A. In particular, we see no reason to allow washrooms on the rooftop. While the Old Ottawa East Community Association continues to have some concerns, particularly with the washrooms, we have no objections to this proposal at this time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that, delegation today. Any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Rose. Next up, we have Paul Goodkey. Paul?
My name's Paul Goodkey.
Great.
Thanks
You have 5
for
minutes. The floor is yours.
Allow me to speak. I'm in favor of the proposal for the 2A building. I noticed, I've been away for about a week on holiday, and there were some new drawings added to the DVAP website dated April 5th, and I believe this is one of them. But there was also, well, this is one of them. This is the roof that I'm wondering about. If I look at the elevation drawings, I see some projections above the height limit at the Main Street frontage. And I don't know what that is. There's 3 columns going up. Whether there's a roof on top of it, I don't know. But I think they must be in error, because this drawing would show a roof at the dotted line on the right. So if you look at the dotted line, that's the roof of the penthouse washroom, elevator, and equipment area. But I'd just like confirmation from, or there should be confirmation that there isn't any other projections above the height limit besides that area and the stair on the western end of the building. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you. So before you leave, I'll certainly make note of that and ask for clarification from staff. Is there any questions for the delegation today? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Goodkey, for coming out. So can I get some clarification on the comments made by the delegation, please?
Certainly. Part and parcel with this application for zoning amendment is also an application for site plan control. And so a resubmission to that site plan control process had been submitted April 5th and posted on the development application search tool. So those are the elevations Mr. Goodkey is referring to. I'm happy to go back. I don't have the elevations with me today, but I can clarify. But to my knowledge, the drawing shown on the screen today illustrates there's 2 mechanical penthouses proposed on building 2A, and that's the subject of this application before us today. And they both meet the provisions of the permitted projections in the zoning bylaw, with the exception of the bathroom included.
Great, thank you for that. Is there further questions to staff? Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, certainly on Mr. Goodkey's inquiry, I want to make sure that we do have that information solid, because I think everyone's in support of this building. I am as well. But I want to make sure that we've got it right. The only piece that I would like to see potentially change is around the bathrooms on the rooftop. I've spoken with regional about that, and actually, this item was originally deferred because Mr. Kardish couldn't be here for the item. Is Mr. Kardish here to talk?
Well, actually, I'm going to ask the applicants if they wish to come forward and speak today. We have quite a few of them, so. Who's representing regional group here today?
Here, we can slide down. Sorry.
Perfect. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Hi, Aaron and Kelly. Thanks for coming to speak with us today. Is Mr. Kardish here today as well, or?
No, he's not able to be here today.
Okay.
Yeah, and he really wanted to be here, but we knew we couldn't defer it one more time.
Okay. No, just because we canceled the last meeting, the full thing, a day in advance, because he couldn't be here for a family emergency.
Yeah.
Totally understood.
Yeah.
But here we are, and he's not here. So. As I mentioned, I am in favor of this. Could you folks potentially comment on the projection that Mr. Goodkey was talking about? Is there actually a further projection besides the 2 that were originally intended in that area? Has that been changed? Like the new DevApp information that came out April 5th, has that changed to have a higher height limit? Okay, so what is that piece that he's speaking about?
Aaron, do you mind going back to the...
Mr. Chair, I'll deal with that in my presentation. It's pretty straightforward.
And I was just ready to say, maybe we can go ahead and allow the applicant to present first. Apologies, I probably should have put that first, but hey, I'm filling in for Jan today. Great.
So we'll be brief, and then we'll have Barry give a bit of a detail, which should answer most of the delegation's questions. So,
great. So for the entire delegation, just so you know, you do have 10 minutes as a group. So you have 10 minutes, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair and Councillors. My name is Kelly Rodenizer. I'm the Director of Commercial and Multifamily Development here at Regional. I'm here with Erin O'Connor, who's the Manager of Land, and she's been responsible for the Greystone development. We'd like to thank the chair and councillors for accepting the deferral of our application until today. We also want to state that Regional is in support of the motion as presented to separate out the zoning bylaw to move forward with 2A, which is 175 Main Street, the 6 stories, and deferring 10 Oblay for the 9 stories. We'd like to make it clear that our position has not changed since our original application, which was filed to the city in March of 2018. Our planning consultant, Novatech, professional's opinion remains the same, that an official plan amendment is not required, which is the same position as the staff's planning, as well as outlined in their report that's presented before you from March 28th. We filed an official plan amendment on Tuesday, April the 9th, to the city. The application has been filed out of an abundance of caution and to clarify the policies related to the permitted heights in the secondary plan. It's important to note that Regional has not filed or made any changes to the building design or massing of 10 Oblay, which is the 9-story building, or 6, and the plans that the delegation was speaking to were updated site plans for the site plan application. We ask that you approve our request to rezone 175 Main Street to allow us to move forward with our 6-story purpose-built rental building with the construction. If successful, we hope to start this summer. And I'll move to Barry to give an overall architectural and urban design context for you.
I'll try to move through this as quickly as possible. I think it's important to realize from a design perspective as you get into something that things evolve and change, and nothing is more substantive than the contrast with the demonstration plan which you see before us, which we inherited when we started to work on this project, which was basically a mixture of 6-story condo buildings sprinkled across the site. It had a combination of the pink as a mixed-use mid-rise, which is anything 4 to 9 stories, and the brown was mid-rise mid-rise residential. This was our first master plan. I think it's important to realize the first thing we did was actually look at the market, actually look at doing a plan that made sense in terms of the neighborhoods around it. So housing diversity and a variety of form is really important. And if you can look at the areas that are dotted, and our initial thought was, hey, these should come down and we should do those as low-rise. And that strategy has been immensely successful because we immediately had people moving in from the surrounding neighborhood who didn't have housing options, and housing options are really important. So that included things like singles and towns, which weren't currently on the plan, with a much finer grain pedestrian scale. Now, there are elements that are higher on the plan. This was our first 3D model of phase 1, and what you'll see is all of this stuff now is built, and this is under construction. But you also realize that other parts of the scheme are evolving and changing because we can't properly anticipate everything. And one of the significant components of change is this area over here, which is now seniors and retirement home. When we started to look at 2A, 2B, the mixed use right on Oblatz and on the Grand Allée, we realized a number of really significant shapers. One is that the Grand Allée, which is a heritage piece, would preserve the view to the Deschâtelet building. It's important to honor that. Secondly, along the Grand Allée was a row of trees which had root balls which had to be accommodated. So we actually had to adjust mass. The other part is Oblatz Avenue is extremely narrow. We didn't realize that actually no parking could happen on Oblatz. And then the other is a market notion that we would actually break up the block so we could create some housing diversity and form diversity. And in the process of doing this, we went through a series of massing allocations, and as Kelly mentioned, we basically, the end of that is we went to a 6-story, which is 2A, and a 9-story, which is 2B. But in part of that, it's a transferring a mass and trying to create something that has a proper human scale. So now I'll speak to Councillor Menard asked me about these elements. This is just a pergola that's on the roof. That's what you're talking about. There's no roof over top of it. It's basically a form. But in designing the two parts of the building, we wanted to reflect different parts of the site, potential of different residents, and also break up the massing along Oblatz and the Grand Allée. So here's our cross-sectional diagram. This is an earlier diagram, so it's not entirely reflective of the final plan, but there are a number of principles that are important to this. One is the greater setback up the Grand Allée, which leads to the Deschâtelet building, the accommodation of the trees, And the other is this notion of 6-story datum, but also relief along the Grand Allée. So you see there's a major courtyard that's been cut back, so it's not a solid wall. And then we also increased the separation between 2A to B significantly, and we think that's a really important piece. Just want to speak a little bit about the cross-section, and that's in yellow on the left, which is your traditional Main Street TM zone. A bit of a rant. I don't actually believe that cross-section makes any sense for Ottawa. I actually believe that what happens at the ground plane is really important. And two significant examples of that are these projects which are recently completed, both of them in Councillor Lieber's ward, and that's 1140 Wellington, where the Bethany Hope building is, and the other one is Westboro Station. Both focus on what happens at the 1- and 2-story component. That is the most important thing in most main streets in Ottawa. This notion that you start right at the sidewalk and go right up actually creates canyons. And the best example I can think of that is the Nuns property just west of Island Park Drive. Rant is over. So this is the site plan, just so you see. What we did feel was important was that there's a gap in between these buildings that provide teaser parking, access to servicing, loading. All of that's pulled off of Oblatz. Oblatz is too narrow. We were successful in forcing some laybys on Oblatz. This is another shot at night showing the offset of the ground plane, the first floor. And I think, although no one's really talked about it, both of these suggest that the building mass and where the positioning of the mechanical penthouse is so far back that it's not in your view or in your mind. This is a 3D vision of what's showing what happens in between. The gap allows also for the residents of the domicile building to the north to actually have views to the Grand Allée. So that's there. And that 2B actually stops after the buildings to the north. This is another view of the same thing. The notion of the offset is important to us, even on Oblatz. So you can see that the building has an offset from the ground plane, and as you look down the street, it has the same general offset. Those are my key points. The others are technical drawings. If you want to go through the sun shadows, I could bore you to death. But the notion of a gap and breaking the buildings up and reducing the massing actually improves the sun shadowing effect and creates gaps in that wall that could exist along Oblatz and the Grand Allée. That's my presentation, Mr. Chair. Happy to answer questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Hoban, for that. Clearly, you put a lot of work into this, so I do appreciate that. Any questions for the applicants?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I think this group's done a great job with 2A. I think that they've worked with the community on 2A, that they've worked with planning and come up with a design that works well for this community. And the reason why is that it doesn't overshadow the Deschâtelet building. It fronts onto Main Street and provides good design compared to the corners on Main next door to it, which was originally already put in. And so I think kudos to what you've done on 2A. I think it's important the planning committee members know why we're here today, why the motion came from Mr. Tierney, Mr. Hubley. The original plan for this space, there was concern about the secondary plan. There was a disagreement over whether the secondary plan allowed for a 9-story building at 2B. So that's why the motion is in front of you today. It allows the separation. 2A can be considered on its own, and there will be no LPAT review of that. And so it can just go through and start construction. 2B and other areas of the site will go through an official plan process to look at an amendment. I think the community welcomes this as well to get some clarity on what's there. But the same design principles that are being used for 2A, I think, need to come into process for 2B in terms of the historical context of this area and the design work. And so I want to ask staff, because I just saw the motion language yesterday around 7 p.m. In terms of a motion of this significance, but I'm in favor of it. I just normally would like to see that a bit earlier. But in terms of the official plan process, which is part of this motion for 2B, can you explain to me how that will work in terms of community being involved, their input? It's not like just an amendment to a zoning. To me, I think it's more important than that, and will take into context other elements of the site. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, that's correct. So the official plan amendment process involves consultation and statutory public meeting, and that will follow that exact process. Mr. James or Ms. O'Connell, if you have anything further to add to that, it's okay.
No, Mr. Chair, no.
Okay, fantastic. 'Cause what I wouldn't want to see is to say, okay, look, we're just doing an official plan process to give, exactly what was asked for in the first place in this space. That shouldn't be the case. There should be true community consultation and input on this. So with that being said, I'm in favor of the motion. I wish the washrooms would be changed. I don't know if someone from committee wants to bring a motion forward on that, but I support it otherwise. So thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks to the applicant for coming out today. Any questions further to staff? Seeing none on this item as amended, is this carried? Oh, I have to carry the motion first. So is the motion carried? And the amending motion is that Vice Chair Hubley read out. Is that carried? He's not reading it again. It's in front of you. So carried? Thank you. Thank you for that. So we're on to item number 2 on the agenda, zoning bylaw amendment for 20 Mark Avenue. We do have one speaker, Chris Greenshields. Chris, are you here? If you can come forward, feel free to take a seat right there, and we'll get your microphone warmed up.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Chris Greenshields. I'm with the Vanier Community Association. I'm speaking on behalf of the VCA. The VCA supports the application to rezone the site of 20 Mark Avenue in Kingsview Park. Our committee and local residents have actively engaged in the consultations on this project and the related project at 263 Greensway. We support the intensification and infill because it fits in to the neighborhood and relates to the neighborhood, not to the properties behind fronting on Montreal Road, for example. In some detail, the city report extols how it fits in consistent with the official plan and the character of the adjoining neighborhood. You will note that the case for 263 Greensway is different, related rather to the higher built form transitioning to Montreal Road, and much more restrained about how it fits into the neighborhood. The 3-story building proposal is consistent with the area's R4 zoning, and most of the property, existing property use, which is a parking lot. So we don't see it as spot zoning. As mentioned, the building, although higher, appears to fit well with the adjoining and opposite 2-story apartment buildings and the adjoining property on the west, which is currently used as a group home. Replacing a parking lot used by residents on Mark Avenue does represent a challenge, but the community has identified another underutilized parking lot nearby. We are not convinced, however, that residents would use the proposed parking garage further away at 263 Greensway. Resident permit and other parking are also available. We welcome the fact that at least one unit will be fitted for disabled use. It may be useful to consider a parking space for a future disabled tenant, either adjoining the new building or with a disabled parking space on the street. The revisions to the side setback are a concern, but we hope these can be addressed as part of the separate site plan control process. The importance of a parking space for drop-off, pickup has also been addressed by the applicant. The proposal to add 2 subgrade units at 2 other apartment buildings, so we're not just talking about 20 Mark, in the vicinity is a concern, not only because of the floodplain conditions, but also because basements in the area are periodically flooded by stormwater, not mentioned in the staff report. We trust that appropriate measures will be taken to minimize the risk of stormwater damage in the renovation and to provide indemnification to tenants should the situation arise. It is important to increase the availability of affordable housing choices, and thus we support the proposal on this basis. I want to thank planning staff for their active engagement on this project, together with that of 263 Greensway. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Greenshields, for your presentation today. Do you have any questions to the delegation? Seeing none, thank you very much. And I guess you're going to be back up on the next item, so we'll see you in a little bit there. The applicant, Dennis Jacobs and Ryan Colwine, are you here?
Yes, we're here. We only need to speak if the committee has any questions for us.
Seeing no questions? No.
I don't know if it'll go to him or to staff, but I'd like to follow up on the question about the disabled parking.
Yeah.
So, is staff prepared to take that, or would you like the applicant?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, yes, there's from a bylaw compliance point of view, there's no parking required for this new building. Through consultation, there was comments about the need for perhaps a short-term parking space or drop-off at the back of the site. That got incorporated into the plan. If there's a need for accessible parking, it can be looked at, but from a zoning bylaw point of view, it's not a requirement at this point.
Great. Wonderful. So any further questions to the applicant, to staff? Seeing none, was there any amendments on this one? No. So on this item, item number 2, 20 Mark Avenue, is this item carried? Great, thank you. Mr. Greenshield, since you're already there, we'll go on to item number 3, 263 Greensway Avenue. You're actually first on the speakers list, so 5 minutes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Members should already have our more detailed written submission. Our main objection to the rezoning application for 263 Greensway is the proposal for spot zoning to permit a higher rise building that is incompatible with the neighborhood. Planning Committee recently, correctly, I think, refused an application for a spot zoning to accommodate expansion of an existing use on Island Park Drive. The report cites the official plan concerning consideration of the character in the surrounding community as a factor in determining compatibility. A 4-story building consistent with existing zoning and floodplain restrictions, we think, will meet the plan's objective of intensification. It would replace a parking lot and double the height compared to the adjacent apartment building and be compatible with the existing area, including the 2 adjacent homes. The community could support this, just as we support the 20 Mark project. Staff write eloquently, as I mentioned, about the 3-story building at 20 Mark and how it satisfies the intensification policies, how the built form and design fit within the immediate surroundings. It fits in terms of streetscapes character and enlivens it. Not so eloquent about 263 Greensway. City staff have commended 20 Mark, but unlike 20 Mark, which also backs on properties on Montreal Road, the report describes the Greensway application largely in terms of its relation to Montreal Road as a transition to the existing neighborhood. Well, it doesn't really address the existing neighborhood, the residential area. There's no reference to responding to the streetscape character. Instead, it dominates the streetscape. It does not fulfill design objectives to include enhancing the sense of community, nor ensuring the new development respects the character of existing areas. The staff report is so different respecting these two because Greensway simply does not meet the conditions. Instead, we seem to have an approach by staff to justify spot rezoning in a small portion of property zoned R4 with the rest of Mark Street corridor, an approach that is not compatible with abutting low-rise building forms and community use, in favor of rezoning so that it might better transition to a higher building if another exception is permitted for an abutting TM zone property under the secondary plan. Instead of relating Greensway as a residential property to the adjacent neighborhood, there is a circuitous argument made to relate it to the potential development on Montreal Road. Despite the proposed ring around Greensway, rezoning also risks opening the door to similar residential redevelopment in the immediate vicinity, resulting in a situation we fear similar to Herongate, where affordable housing is being eliminated. Such a trend would undermine the official plan and provisions concerning affordable housing. The proposed floodplain limits do not justify a 6-story building. It may have been better to turn this portion of the property into green space befitting of a floodplain, but we have supported intensification and infill here with suitable landscaping, given the floodplain and periodic stormwater damage. Accordingly, we would also hope that the city see the developer commit to consult and contract in writing with neighbors about any damage related to water drainage. The City commissioned WISE report recommended against building an MUP on the south side of the development. Aside from the reduced green space, there are safety issues, as the report points out. With the garage entry abutting the MUP, together with the proposed open access to the Vanier Parkway, the project design risks promoting more of the existing criminal activity, particularly behind the Tim Hortons. Recalling the mistakes around the city's now closed Waller Street Mall across from the Booth Shelter, together with the ongoing criminal issues here and the pending decision of a mega shelter nearby, this committee risks repeating mistakes outlined in the Citizen article on the mall fiasco almost exactly 1 year ago. This would be inconsistent with the city's official plan and the provincial policy statement to avoid development and land use patterns which may cause public safety concerns. Members of the committee, you're in a unique position to consider 2 applications, one that's strongly praised
Greenshields,
and
if I can get you
another
to wrap
that
up,
doesn't
please.
fit so much. So in our view, Greensway clearly fails the same test. Thank you very much. Merci.
Thank you for your presentation today. Do we have any questions of the delegation? Seeing none, thank you for coming out. Next up, we have Andrew Lunsden. Andrew? Great. And we have 2 more speakers after that, Linda Fish and Susan Lapine. So I just want to ensure that you guys are in the crowd. Good.
Good morning. My name is Andrew Lumsden. I've lived in the city of Vanier for over 50 years. I heartily endorse the comments just made by Mr. Greenshield concerning the proposed development at 263 Greensway. But I've come here today more to express my concerns that we may have another Herongate in the making. Not as tragic, perhaps, but potentially very disruptive to approximately 250 persons now living in rental apartments on Mark Avenue in Vanier. As we have just heard, the owner of these apartments has applied to the city to rezone from R4 to R5 an adjacent parcel of land known as 263 Greensway. Mark Avenue now houses 11 apartment buildings constructed in 1951. A 12th building is located immediately in front of the proposed 6-story structure. Each of the 12 70-year-old 2-story rental buildings contains approximately 10 2-bedroom apartments. They are now showing signs of aging, cracks in the walls and ceilings, rust coming out of the taps, wooden floors that need resanding and refinishing. This is not to suggest that the developer has been a bad landlord. A few years back, for instance, new windows were installed. In recent years, however, there have been obvious signs of neglect. Repairs have been hard to arrange, and the cleaning of the hallways and shared laundry rooms is perfunctory at best. On the outside, the entrance doors are encased in attractive wooden frames. Sadly, they have not been attended to in years. As you enter these buildings, you are faced with peeling paint and other evidence of disrepair and lack of attention. Thus, all the indications are that, contrary to his assertions, the owner has little or no intention of continuing to retain these buildings as reasonably affordable rental properties. But I'm not here to take shots at developers. Instead, like everyone else, I want a better city, a city that welcomes and accommodates all, a city in which the poorer are not increasingly segregated from the more affluent, however inadvertently this may happen, a city that takes positive steps to fill the desperate need for more affordable housing, a city whose number one consideration in deciding whether or not to approve a zoning or a building application carefully examines the impact on the availability and location of affordable housing. Finally, I repeat, if the rezoning of 263 Greensway is approved and the new 6-story building erected, the developer or a new owner will surely, sooner or later, move on to request a similar application for Mark Avenue. This will jeopardize the low-rent housing on this street. It will be one more step in the gentrification of Vanier and Overbrook, but only west of the Vanier Parkway. East of the Parkway is quite another matter.
30 seconds.
East of the Parkway is quite another matter. The approval by Council over a year ago of a 350-bed men-only shelter on Montreal Road ensures that that part of Vanier and Overbrook will not become gentrified anytime soon. Thank you.
Right down to the second, so thank you for that. Seeing no questions to the delegation, thank you very much for coming out today. Next up, we have Linda Fish.
Good morning.
Hi, Linda.
Bonjour, mon nom est Linda Fish, and I have lived at 30 Mark Avenue for the past 19 years. 30 Mark is next to 20 Mark, which is currently a parking lot, but soon to be developed into an apartment building. I asked to speak today to express my concern or fears that the city's decision to approve spot zoning at 263 Greensway will create a future precedent for the older apartment buildings on Mark Avenue. Why do I think this? Because these buildings, built in 1951, have been neglected and barely kept up to standards. The owner, through management, says that they won't tear down the old apartment building on Greensway, but has been rumored for many years that they were not adding a 10th basement apartment there because it was going to be torn down. The current buildings on Mark Avenue are neglected, and one gets the feeling that there is a reason for letting them in these conditions. Will they also be a future spot zoning proposal? My question also is, how will they maintain the 75-plus new apartments if they are not able to maintain the 110-plus apartments that they already own? Will they hire more staff or simply rely on one superintendent and one cleaner, as they currently have? My question to all of you is, why is it necessary to change the zoning to R5 in this beautiful residential area established as an R4 zoning? I'm not against the owner building at 263 Greensway, but not a 6-story. With a bit of creativity, they can still build 75-plus apartments with an R4. Thank you for the opportunity to express my concern, and with the hope that we will be heard and not ignored. Merci.
Thank you very much, Madame Fish. Any questions for the delegation? Oh, excuse. Yeah, we do have a question for you, actually. So if I could ask you to please take a seat.
Bonjour, madame, ça va bien?
Oui, merci. Bonjour.
J'ai une petite question. Vous avez soulevé un point qui m'a intrigué. C'est indirectement relié à l'application, mais le résident qui a parlé avant vous l'a également souligné. Vous êtes résidente des propriétés locatives présentement, du même propriétaire. Êtes-vous inquiète de perdre votre logement? Il semble y avoir comme une inquiétude actuelle, mais nous, aujourd'hui, ce que le comité est appelé à regarder, c'est deux segments de nouvelles propriétés. Donc, je ne comprends pas l'élément de risque aux propriétés existantes, mais vous êtes locataire, donc avez-vous reçu une lettre d'éviction ou quelque chose de ça?
Non, c'est... I think maybe I'll just speak in English.
Just of note, we do have simultaneous translation as well, so if members wish to participate.
Il y a des rumeurs depuis longtemps, bien avant qu'on sache qu'ils étaient pour construire un nouvel édifice sur Greensway, que cet édifice serait démoli. Puis maintenant, moi, ce qui m'implique, j'habite là. J'adore le quartier et j'aime beaucoup l'environnement du quartier. Pourquoi commencer à construire des édifices plus élevés? Et puis, c'est un peu ça. Je suis d'accord avec mes collègues, M. Greenshield, M. Lumsden. I think it's a question that I'm not fearful that they're going to kick me out tomorrow and that I'm going to be part of the Heron Gate. It's just that it has been an affordable area for me. It permits me to do other things in my life. And I love the environment. We're next to the river, the trees, it's beautiful. If we start building high-rises along that area, we're going to end up looking like Rideau Street, which is just horrible now. And I'm just concerned. I'm expressing my concern today because I support what Mr. Greenshield has just expressed, and Mr. Lumsden, is the fear that we start with spot zoning one area, and the next thing we know, that whole street will become a spot zone.
I just wanted to clarify. So I recognize your opposition to the proposed what would be permitted a 4-story, but is proposed a 6-story. I get in terms of the 263 Greensway, but I wanted to clarify that as a tenant of those properties at this time, you're in no risk of losing your unit, correct?
I hope not.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame Fish. Maintenant, Madame Suzanne Lépine. Bonjour, Madame.
Bonjour. Bonjour.
5 minutes.
Ça va bien aujourd'hui? Merci. Suzanne Lépine, je suis résidente de Kingsview Park. Kingsview Park, c'est le petit triangle où est-ce que le rue Mark se trouve. C'est un petit quartier, c'est un des plus petits et vieux quartiers de Vanier. Il y a à peu près juste 7 rues dans Kingsview Park. La majorité, c'est R1, des résidences, et il y a quelques blocs des R4. Alors, je suis d'accord avec l'édifice au 263 Greensway, mais je m'oppose ardemment au changement de zonage. D'un R4 à un R5, je n'accepte pas ça. Le 263 Greensway, il est intégré à notre quartier. Il fait partie du quartier résidentiel de Vanier. Il ne fait pas partie du chemin Montréal. Donc, c'est le quartier dans Kingsview Park. En respectant le R4, le 263, il peut augmenter, il peut avoir un autre étage. On peut construire plus haut. Donc, en respectant le R4, ça permet l'harmonie, la compatibilité du quartier. Donc, on a les résidences R1, R4, et puis R5, ou le développement du chemin Montréal plus haut. Alors, en accordant un R5 au 263 Greensway, vous créez un précédent. Pour le restant, vous créez, comme je répète ce que les autres ont dit, c'est du spot zoning. Il y a d'autres rues où est-ce qu'il y a encore d'autres appartements semblables dans notre petit quartier. Qu'est-ce qui va empêcher que le propriétaire va pas faire la même chose? Alors, c'est encore du spot zoning. L'autre chose qui m'inquiète puis qui inquiète les résidents, c'est qu'en avant du 263, du 267, il y a le 263, il y a sur la même parcelle de terrain. Qu'est-ce qui va empêcher, une fois que si vous accordez le changement de zonage, qu'est-ce qui empêcherait le propriétaire de détruire le 263 juste en face, puis créer quelque chose encore plus gros? Une fois que le zonage est accepté, un R5, ça se limite pas à 6 étages, ça peut aller beaucoup plus haut. L'autre chose aussi qui est inquiétante que j'accepte pas, c'est le MOP, the multi-use passage that's going to be built. Je suis complètement opposé à ça. C'est très inquiétant. Je demeure dans le quartier. C'est pareil au MOP de la rue, Waller Mall sur le marché Baye. Ça va créer le même problème. Puis ça, je sais qu'on peut en parler dans un autre, dans le plan du CID. Ça peut être discuté à ce moment-là. Mais je m'oppose à ce passage-là. Je demande de conserver le R4 comme on accepte le 20 rue Marc, comme M. Greenshield a bien expliqué. Le 20 Marc, c'est parfait, ça respecte le voisinage, ça respecte le built form design, it respects the immediate surrounding. The development of 20 Mark is consistent with the guideline for low-rise infill. C'est ce qu'on veut. On veut le low-rise infill, tout comme le 20 Mark. Alors, si vous acceptez un R5, ça va détruire le quartier. Ça va détruire notre quartier résidentiel. Donc, un R4, ça va garder l'harmonie dans le quartier. Et puis, je vous remercie du temps que vous m'avez accordé. Et puis, j'espère que vous allez refuser un changement de zonage R5 dans notre quartier. Merci.
Merci, Madame Lepine. Question pour la délégation? Non? Merci. Now, members of committee, we do have the applicant, Denip Jacobs, and Ryan Kuhlwein here. Any questions for the applicant today before we go to questions to staff? Do you feel a need to speak today, Dennis or Ryan?
Not if the committee doesn't feel it necessary.
Great. Any questions to staff? Councillor Fleury?
So just wanted to follow up on some of the community concerns relating to the 263. Obviously, pending the review today, there would be further elements relating to design and landscaping and so on relating to site plan. But notwithstanding, the last speaker asked questions relating to the change in zoning to an R5 and what that means relating to potential risk for neighboring properties or that community. Can we get maybe a point of clarification from staff on risk relating to the zone, which is an R4, and this specific application?
Mr. Chair, I'll answer the first part of that question in that it went to an R5 zone because that's the zone code that would allow a mid-rise building. So from just a zoning code perspective, we needed to go R5 to recognize the mid-rise. Each application is reviewed on its own merits, and there's no proposals before us right now on the balance of Mark Avenue. I haven't seen anything to indicate that any are coming, but if applications that the community do fear, those again will be reviewed on their own merit. And I think just to further talk about that, the difference in the rationales that was spoken to in the two reports between 20 Mark and 216 Greensway, my opinion is that although on the same corridor and the same street, the site context of those two properties is vastly different, which is why you see the resulting of the two different proposals. So is there a risk? I can't answer that, but if such an application would come in, it would be reviewed on its own merit, and this proposal for 263 Greensway would not set a precedent.
It's certainly something, committee, that we have to watch for, and if there were other applications coming in as an R4 in that specific area, I would flag it, but based on the applicant coming and just further down the street coming in within the zone, to me it indicates that there's specific elements to that site that really rears on to the Vanier Parkway that's unique to that site, which I believe can can accept more height and more rental apartments. That said, I do think that the Mark Street corridor is a very stable rental community, and there's an appetite not just from the existing community, but those in the surrounding that stays. That stability stays for that street. So I'm viewing those applications as completing the envelope of what is the potential along that corridor. Obviously, we can't speak to Montreal Road because this is not a property that faces onto Montreal Road, but for that specific community, I think we have to look at the application in the context that further down the street, they didn't come in and ask for a rezoning to an R5. They're respecting the R4 zone. So there's a good example to say that there's stability along that street in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Councillor Lieber.
You know, I think Andrew has answered it. Mark Avenue as a potential R5, I think what I heard is that you would, on a preliminary basis, consider it to be very different. We wouldn't see 6 stories marching down Mark Avenue. Sorry, once again, why not? What is different about the context along Mark that would keep that height at the R4 height versus what I consider to be kind of a corner and an edge condition?
Mr. Chair, I view the balance of Mark Avenue as an edge condition to the existing low-rise neighborhood where it's not fronting on Vanier Parkway. It doesn't have that unique site context where a 6-story building would have enough room to provide that transition. Like I said, the two sites are very close to each other, but the site context of the two are quite different in my opinion. And I think it would be a much more difficult argument to propose a 6-story building on the balance of Mark versus what you saw on 263 Greensway.
There's no secondary plan that contemplates Mark Avenue at this point, right?
No, it ends on Montreal Road.
Yeah, so the traditional Main Street policies that are part of the most recent OPA, though, would see Mark Avenue captured within the new depth, right?
It would be possible, Mr. Chair, but only through lot consolidation if there was a development that took in both the Montreal Road properties and the Mark Avenue properties as one site. I wouldn't view something in behind on Mark Avenue with only frontage on Mark Avenue as being open to those traditional Main Street policies because there's no direct sort of access to Montreal Road.
But that's not the rationale for Roosevelt, which is in behind. It's not contiguous to Richmond Road. The official plan policies with respect to the new depth of what's considered to be traditional Main Street applied to that discontiguous property in behind.
I wasn't on that file.
Just to respond, Mr. Chair, Roosevelt is a different situation in the Planning Department's opinion based on the configuration of the traditional Main Street having a sawtooth pattern in that area. And we felt that, and that's an R zone that we put there behind Roosevelt as well, not a traditional Main Street. It was to be sort of a transition to that, to allowing for buildings that started at 6 to go down to 4 and to 2 stories to reflect upon the height of buildings that already exist further along Roosevelt. So those are two different situations than the one that Andrew was talking about here along this Main Street. And how Mark Avenue or Mark Street has a parallel road to this, and it's a different context.
Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lieber. Councillor Moffat.
Just a question on the zoning being R5. Why wouldn't you have considered a traditional Main Street here?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, from the official plan designation, the property is located in the general urban area designation. The proposal before us was for a residential use building, which is consistent with that designation, and the R5 zoning is what we went with. It was based on the proposal before us.
All right, I just was noticed across the road without frontage on there's a TM3 zone, but in behind the TM3 zone, it's a traditional Main Street zone, which is directly across from 263 Greensway. Just curious. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for that, Councillor Moffat. Any further questions of staff? Seeing none on this item, is this item carried? Carried. Thank you. On to the next item, item number 4. I want to thank Mr. Flanagan for hanging out for so long. If I can get you to come forward. This item is 4840 Bank Street. We only have one speaker of note. Great. If I can get you to just come down here, there's a microphone at the very end of the table. And if you're new to coming to committee, you have 5 minutes of talk time, and the floor is yours.
Sorry. Okay, this is in regards to the developments at 4747 Bank Street, 4755 Bank Street, 4789 Bank Street, and 4840 Bank Street. Residential areas are surrounding the Leitrim wetlands, and there's a lot of conflicts with the wildlife and the human activity. There are snapping turtles roaming around in Finley Creek, turtles getting hit on roads, turtles nesting in sandboxes. Anyways, these turtles need to go somewhere, and it's not appropriate for them to be in the streets and in people's yards. So there needs to be more parkland around the buffer zone of the Leitrim wetlands. This is very important to protect this area, and that's why I oppose the decision for this development, because there's just too much going on between the sensitive wildlife here and all the new developments surrounding it, with it in the middle, kind of like a donut. Anyways, I will go on furthermore. There are more. This area is home to many at-risk snapping turtles important to the Leitrim wetlands. To prevent these turtles from wandering in the development area and possibly nesting in the area, a fence will need to be installed. This fence will need to be surrounding the entire development area. The time of installation will need to take place at the dawn of spring, right after the winter snow and ice is gone, because these snappers will start wandering after winter hibernation in the clearing area. I have seen this at a nearby area being cut. These snapping turtles will flee to, or any turtles will flee to Bank Street, where they face road mortality. Once construction is complete, the snapping turtles and other turtles will need to adapt, but their home and refuge, the Leitrim wetlands, along with the parkland surrounding this, must always remain untouched.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair Hubel.
I just wonder, it's unfortunate that the councillor for the area couldn't be here today, but she talks in that amendment that she wants to try and preserve some of the trees in that area, but she doesn't mention anything about the turtles. Have you had a chance to talk to her about the turtles?
I haven't talked to her about the turtles, but residents in the area have been unhappy with large snapping turtles. There's been large snapping turtles found on Bank Street, in Finley Creek, that have died there, been hit by cars. One of them fleeing a cutting area on Bank Street, where there's more development. So especially these snapping turtles that belong to the wetlands are having a hard time with the people, or the people are having a hard time with them. And
well, I would encourage you to talk to her, because there's mitigation measures that can be taken, and yes. I'm not sure, because she's not here to tell us if that was the intent of that amendment or not, what she wanted to do with it. So I would encourage you to reach out to her, because there are steps that she can take to prevent that from happening. Okay?
Any further questions to the delegation? Seeing none, thank you very much, Daniel, for coming out today. I appreciate that. So on this item, we do have the applicant, Aaron O'Connor and Vincent Denome from Claridge. Do you see the need to speak, or is any questions from the committee for our applicant today? I don't see any questions. Do you feel a need to speak today? Yeah, please come on down then.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. My name is Aaron O'Connor. I'm the Manager of Land Development with the Regional Group and the applicant. for this property. This property includes a range of housing types from singles to towns to medium-rise. It also includes a commercial block, and it also includes parkland, and the Area A that's on that plan is part of a Casino wetland buffer, which is about 100 meters from the Casino wetland. The Leitrim wetland is actually further east. I don't know how many meters, but it's significantly further from this development, and the Leitrim wetland also has a 120-meter buffer from that. I just wanted to mention with, this site as well as the one to the north of it, there's a large professional team who's monitoring the activities in that site. And over construction, they do monitor, and we do have a biologist on site, though we haven't seen any turtles yet. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Do we have questions to the applicant? Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much. Similar to Councillor Hubley's intervention before, just wondering what staff have seen or observed in that area with regard to wildlife, and if there is mitigation measures that are being put in place at this point.
So through the subdivision process, there are conditions for not this subdivision, but the one to the west and north is abutting the wetland itself. It's on the other slide. So we are working with the Conservation Authority to
Can I get you to speak a little closer to the microphone?
Sorry.
Thank you.
So we are working with the Conservation Authority with respect to the subdivision agreement, and any buffering or fencing would have to be approved by them.
We also, Mr. Chair, have a wildlife protocol that we follow in terms of when the subdivision is being developed to deal with wildlife, so that those impacts are considered.
Vice Chair Hubley.
So to follow along that, I think Councillor Menard and I share the same concern. So all the protocols that are in place for dealing with wildlife, we have them across the city that we do these kinds of things. That's all being followed. I believe you mentioned the Conservation Authority is already involved as well. And has there been like any public presentation about the measures being taken? Because normally we take quite a few steps to make sure that turtles aren't hurt or any other species in the area. Has that been part of, was there a councillor's ward meeting or something on this, or no?
Mr. Chair, there was a public meeting held in the community. This was not identified as a concern. Historically, it has been a large issue with the development of Leitrim, but this particular subdivision is actually somewhat removed from that, so it's somewhat not surprising that that wasn't raised.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Vice Chair. On 4840 Bank Street, is this item carried? As amended? Thank you. So we're on to our final item today, which is item number 8. Item number 8 is the Official Plan Amendment 150, Settlement of Appeals, Building Height and Design. So at this point, while we're waiting for everyone to get set up, I'll get Vice Chair Hubley to go out and read the amending motion.
Therefore, be it resolved that pending the outcome of the hearing at the Local Planning Appeals Tribunal on May 22nd, 2019, that Planning Committee direct Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development staff to bring the zoning provisions for the high-rise buildings for approval to the Planning Committee on June 13th, 2019, and to Council on June 26th, 2019.
Great, thank you for that. So at this point, we do have staff. We do have Murray Chown on the speakers list. Murray, are you here? Great, thanks for hanging out. Do you wish to speak today? I believe this is held by Councillor Menard. Were your questions would you have any questions to Mr. Chown, or would it be to staff only? To staff. Thank you very much, Murray. So we'll go right to questions to staff. Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. And if you could just go through the process a little bit with me. We're trying to settle this amendment before it goes to LPAT and this kind of carries on with a council instruction back in 2016 that sort of directed us to do this for a number of amendments. In this scenario, when these are presumably approved, will the new official plan these will sort of be written in stone in the new official plan? I take it that with the update that happens, likely these amendments that are occurring now would continue right along with that update of the official plan.
Mr. Chairman, it's quite possible. However, the new official plan is a brand new official plan, so there is a public process that goes with the discussion of any and all policies that are associated with what the new framework is going to be.
Okay, that's helpful. And then in terms of this one in particular, there's one section I did want to get some more insight from staff on, and that's the repeal of item 179 and introducing the new policy 13. Can you go? It's in the details of document 1. Can you just go through the rationale why we're doing that? It seemed to be that we were receiving applications anyway. They were getting approved for height variances either way, and that this was sort of an impediment to that? Or I'd like to just get more information for the rationale for removing that one.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. The current policies on major urban facilities do not have any height limits whatsoever. They only require a zoning amendment, and these are typically major developments, hospitals, universities, and the like. Yeah. There's a requirement in the official plan that any of these facilities locate near transit facilities. When we were doing OPA 150, the emphasis was on certainty, but these are projects that in any circumstance get a high degree of scrutiny and evaluation. So in discussion with the industry was concerned that the limits that were placed in 150 restrict that because it would require an official plan amendment as well. And even now, these major facilities do not require an official plan amendment. The proposed change is basically saying just leave these policies the way they are now.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. That's it for me. Thanks.
Great. Councillor Judas.
So just a point of clarification, and maybe it's just me, but in terms of arterial main streets, maybe this speaks to some of the other changes. It speaks to the fact that new policy 11 recognizes that taller buildings may be considered at transit-supportive locations. It goes on to speak about specific locations and transit priority routes, and speaks to transit. In the last little while, and actually probably over the past couple of years, we've been having this discussion about what comes first, transit or development. And I'm just curious as to how this ties into, does it mean future transit? Are we talking about existing transit? It speaks to major intersections, for instance, that could be conducive for transit priority, but we know that at this point only one bus runs down. So I'm just trying to get some clarification. When we're speaking about transit, are we talking about current state? Are we talking about future state? Are we talking about vision state? What are we looking at?
Through the Chair, we are talking about planned transit.
Okay, so future.
Future, yes. If we were talking about current transit, we would be forever chasing whatever OC Transpo chain determines in terms of its bus routing. Mm-hmm. The plan is set up as a vision of the future, and we have in our official plan a transit plan that is the ultimate. And that includes potential locations for stations, and in those locations we encourage development because it's better to get the development in there to support the transit when it is delivered.
So thank you very much for that, and I think that that's something that we definitely need to be looking at as we're amending the official plan, the TMP, as well as any future developments, that we need to look at how transit is going to not just be in the future, but what we can do to encourage those developments to incorporate transit focused. Because I'm being just selfish, I'm looking at one that's coming up in my ward. I know we just passed one at the intersection of Hunt Club and Riverside. we need to start being proactive and making sure that we're looking to the future, but incorporating the elements now that will provide some relief. So I'm fine with all of this. I just wanted that clarification. But now that I know that this is going to feed into the conversation going forward, that has to be at the forefront. Thank you very much.
That's very much the idea, Mr. Chairman, through the official plan.
Great. So thank you. Looking around, seeing no further questions of staff on this item. Item number 8, official plan 150 settlement appeals. Is this item carried? Yep. So we're carrying the motion first, and then Vice Chair Hubley read out the amending motion. So on the amending motion, is that carried? Great. So we have no notices of motion, no inquiries, other business. This will be adjournment. Our next meeting will take place Thursday, April 25th, 2019. Thank you very much, everyone.